Friends, I have a terrible confession to make. I have never travelled on the line from Greenford to West Ealing before. Yes, despite being a YouTuber who primarily focuses on railways in and around London, this short line, not even 2.5 miles long, has thus far eluded me. So many times have I been to Greenford, yet not once did I get on the train. Oh well, suppose I'd better get on to that, hadn't I? The line runs between West Ealing and Greenford, with 3 intermediate stops at Drayton Green, Castlebar Park and South Greenford. It was known historically as the Greenford Loop, and that hints at its true purpose. To understand this, you need to know a little about the history of the lines at either end. The line through West Ealing was part of the Great Western Railway's original main line from London to Bristol. This opened in 1838, when railways were still a fairly new concept. The GWR had a route to Birmingham, but it was slow and indirect. In fact, it was so indirect that in order to go north to Birmingham you had to go south to Reading. As the century continued, more railways came along, providing them with some serious competition. So, as the end of the century drew near, the GWR decided to team up with another company, the Great Central Railway, to build a new railway that would provide them with a more direct route to the Midlands. The Great Central at the time had to use the busy Metropolitan Railway to get to their terminus at Marylebone. So this would give them a handy bypass. The Great Western built a line from Acton to Northolt to access this, the New North Main Line as it was called, and Greenford was on this New North Main Line. This is all very complicated, but basically the Greenford line was a connection between the original main line and the New North Main Line. It wasn't just about running trains between Greenford and West Ealing, but about running trains beyond. Indeed, the reason it's called the Greenford Loop is because the GWR intended to run trains from Paddington down to West Ealing, over the loop, and then back up to Paddington again, via the New North Main Line. Officially, the line opened on the 1st of July 1904. Unofficially, the first revenue-earning trains ran over it on the 3rd of June 1903, serving the Royal Agricultural Show at Park Royal. Greenford was not yet open, and indeed wouldn't be completed until the 1st of October 1904. At the time there was very little by way of housing in the area. Indeed, the only station on the line at opening was Castlebar Park, or Castlebar Park Halt, as it was known until 1969. The GWR weren't worried about the sparse population. They were playing the long game, hoping that development would come and their railway would stimulate it. Drayton Green Halt was the next station to open on the 1st of March 1905. South Greenford was the last on the 20th of December 1926. The intermediate stations were the classic GWR halt. That meant basic wooden platforms and corrugated iron shelters. The shelters were rather stylish as corrugated iron huts go, being in the style nicknamed pagoda. This one at Didcot is similar, although the ones on the Greenford Loop had no windows. The station at South Greenford was actually second-hand. It had been here at Trumper's Crossing on the Brentford branch, which closed in February of 1926. Trains on the loop were typically very short, at most times just one coach. At the start, the GWR ran what it confusingly described as motor cars, but which are more commonly called rail motors. These were carriages with a small steam locomotive built in, not very powerful, but a popular solution for lines with low passenger numbers. The early services ran between Park Royal and Acton Main Line. Soon, trains using the loop would terminate at Westbourne Park, Southall, Paddington, Willesden Junction, Clapham Junction, Victoria, and even Oxford. I assume the train to Oxford was not a rail motor. Later, passenger services would be auto trains. These were the successor to the rail motor, a small locomotive hauling 1 or 2 coaches which were fitted with controls linked to the locomotive. These trains were also known as push-pulls due to the fact that the engine could propel the train backwards as well as pull it forwards. The service over the line is still nicknamed the push and pull to this day. From 1934, services over the loop would start at Ealing Broadway. In 1948, all services beyond Greenford were cut back. Everything between there and West Ruislip would now be the preserve of the Underground. The Underground had arrived the previous year, and in fact the Greenford station you see now is the second version, rebuilt slightly east of the original to take Underground trains. In 1958, diesel railcars took over on the loop. Single-car units, sometimes hauling a trailer coach. The line never seems to have merited more than 2 coaches. In the 1960s, the halts were rebuilt with more substantial platforms and less interesting buildings. Generally, this was not a romantic time for the railways. In 1988, the service was extended from Ealing Broadway to Paddington. The general impression I get is that the line was something British Rail would rather was not there. The service was gradually cut back. And by 2000 it was the familiar West Ealing to Greenford shuttle. Despite that, in 1992 they sent new trains to run the line, the Class 165 Turbostars. These trains still operate the route today. From 2018 to 2022 the line became famous, or possibly infamous, for its ghost train. This was not as exciting as it sounds, at least if you're not a train nerd. It was a train that ran once a week as a legal formality from West Ealing to West Ruislip, with no intermediate stops. Remember the new North Main Line? Well, that's another line that Chiltern Railways would quite like to close. But closing a line comes with all sorts of legal bumf. Easier to run the absolute bare minimum service. Anyway, in November last year they went even more bare minimum and replaced the train with a bus. 1 train a week and it's a rail replacement bus service. I feel like there's a joke about British Railways in there somewhere. Last year the line was supposed to become a test bed for Viva Rail's battery electric Class 230 units. Unfortunately, Viva Rail has now gone into liquidation, although the trains have been purchased by GWR. That's the current train operator, GWR, not the one that built the line. So you never know, maybe the Greenford branch will get its 230s after all. These days, the line is actually pretty good for a short branch line. There's 1 service from Paddington in the early morning and 1 service back late at night. But otherwise it's a half-hourly shuttle between the 2 ends of the line. Oh, except on Sundays, when there's no service. Trains at West Ealing use a new bay platform to avoid getting in the Elizabeth line's way. The trains themselves include charge points and even a toilet, which is more than you can say for the Elizabeth line. It's a strange little line. Not the busiest or the most scenic, but still curious. I'm not surprised it gets so much attention from railway enthusiasts. And now I've finally had a go myself. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like, as ever, to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon, as well as here on YouTube. You are the push to my pull. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.